Hi, this is Dr. Andrew Hahn, and this is episode 51 of Guided Self-Healing Fearless Living. And in this episode, we're going to talk about four more patterns. We're going to talk about individuation trauma, which is really about separation, individuation trauma. We're going to talk about the fear of loss of self in relationship and that pattern. We're going to talk about seduction patterns, and we're going to talk about wonderful patterns. So get ready for a journey that we will learn together and hopefully have some chance to experience a little of this together if you wish. So let's start off with individuation trauma. And individuation trauma is really about when I go off into the world, whether it's the world of soul, the first time we ever separated from source, if that's something to believe, or, even when we're children, or when we go off on journeys and we need support. And we go out into the world, and either because of our own ways of going out into the world, we go out very fast, or we lose our way, or we don't even do that, but we didn't look back, or we're just we don't have that source from which we separated. When we look back, that can be really traumatic. So of course, when we go out into the world, particularly like as toddlers, we want to be able to look back and know that home is there, and that we can go safely out because we have something to come back to. So what happens, of course, when that is not the case, is it can be very traumatic. And as I say, this happens in two realms. In the realm of energy and soul, what you get is narratives of someone who is, for the first time, energetically separating from what they consider source. And this really is about separation. And so there's a racing out into the world, and then sometimes you race out like precocious adolescence, or you lose your way or something, so that no one was there when you look back, and you feel adrift and you feel lost. And that's the core of this pattern. So it really is about a pattern when I leave mother or home or whatever it is for you, and then I look back and no one's there. And as I said, this can happen in the world of soul. If that's the case, then people will feel adrift, and they feel like they search for anything that will care for them, no matter what that is. And that can be pretty devastating, because they'll sort of sell their soul to have the sense of someone who is there. Or there's a variety of other things that can happen also. But the key, of course, if it's that, is to redo the moment of this separation and individuation, and make sure that there is a kind of cord of light, so that when you go out into the world, you know that even when you go out, you're never really separating truly. It just appears to be so, which is very, very deep. This can also happen when you leave, like stories where you leave, home, knowing that someone will be there so that you can go out into the world, whether it's a planet or a country or whatever, that you can count on something that is still there holding home. And then, of course, that's not what happens. Or it can happen, in, childhood, usually in the, second, third year. There's a whole developmental aspect called separation, individuation. And it's like, when you begin to become a separate human being, you need to know that there's something you can count on. And if there isn't, it can be very dangerous, in terms of feeling like you're all alone and you've lost home. So if you want to know about this, just really let yourself for one moment experience what happens in the body when you have this trauma around separation, and you feel like what happens when you leave home, or you leave mother, or you leave whatever it is that is mother for you, or parent. Although usually it is more about the archetypal mother than it is about the archetypal parent, unfortunately, still, because we've genderized separation. Um, and hopefully at some point or other that will no longer be the case. But just to feel what that feels like in the body when you separate and suddenly you look back and no one is there, and bring all your attention to the sensation and let it share its story while you say, I am here with you, I am holding you, I'm still witnessing you. And then if they have to, of course, they can then relive the story again, but this time doing it differently. So that's the individuation trauma. So now we go to something that is related but different, which is the fear of loss of self in relationship. And really what this is about is that some of us are, to some degree, all of us, but some more than others, are really afraid of the kind of levels of intimacy that can come up if you are really open and vulnerable and fully engaged, open-hearted and open-minded and transparent with someone. And when you get that fear, for whatever reason, instead of sitting with it because the fear feels too much, you do something to protect yourself from that fear. And that something can be you get in too close and you become overly dependent, or you pull away and you become overly isolated, but all of these are protections, or you do something impulsively and you, in a sense, bring in a third, but the third may not be another person. It may be alcohol, or it may be work, or it may be whatever. And of course, what's most often devastating in our culture is if the thing you bring in, if you are doing it in a triangular way, is another person and having affairs and stuff like that. So the invitation here again is to let yourself really see what happens when you open to, am I fully able to be vulnerable, fully engaged, fully open hearted, open-minded, open-bodied with a beloved, which is usually what we're talking about here, although not exclusively. And to notice what happens in the body when you really allow yourself to open to that possibility of being really fully present with another. And insofar as that brings up anxiety, which if you really allow that level of being in harm's way, it can, because of course, if we let ourselves be transparent in some way, shape, or form, we are in harm's way more. And our capacity to hold that, and then, most of us at some point or other find that so difficult to hold. So we do something. And I just invite you to notice what happens when it's too scary to be that close. So you get in closer, you pull away, or you bring something else in. And just to feel what that feels like in the body when you bring in something else to, in a sense, protect yourself from that level of intimacy. Feel it in the body, and then just bring your attention there and let it share what its story is and what it needs. So that's the next one. Seduction is, of course, a relational pattern because, of course, as always, you need a seducer and a seducee. But really what seduction comes from is a kind of pseudo-aliveness. So if you feel like on some level you're numb inside, then you have to awaken. And instead of, if it's too painful to sit with the sense of deadening or numbness inside, or whatever that is, you let yourself find some kind of pseudo aliveness. And perhaps the archetype for this is, if you have a parent who is depressed and the child needs that parent's love and doesn't feel them there, they may do anything, in order to get their parents to reawaken. But of course, that doesn't exactly solve the problem, because the problem is that the parent is depressed or whatever is going on and not fully able to be there. And so the child then, instead of really just being present with the parent, has to do something to try to awaken the parent, which doesn't really work. And then they get into some kind of symbiotic relationship where they become enmeshed with each other and then pull away, etc. That's what happens there. And the same thing, of course, happens in relationships where, we can't handle the level of intimacy in a relationship. And so we bring in some other. And of course, it's not just about, intimacy where we bring in another, because seduction is when there's any egoic need or any egoic gratification that gets in the way of being truly engaged with life. So the story of Dr. Faust and Mephistopheles, and saying, like, I don't feel fully enlivened because I want to have power, or I want to have fame, or I want to have whatever. So you let yourself be seduced into it, or you seduce others so that they will give you what you need. And so if we're looking at seduction patterns, you look at times that you felt deadened, and then you were open to something that felt charismatic but not like the real deal. So feel that deadening in the body and the pseudo aliveness that came. Or if you're being the seducer in that situation, that you need something also, and so you seduce the other in order to get your own sense of gratification or ego aliveness. And this often happens in relationships for whatever reason. So I just invite you again to feel the craving for a kind of aliveness when you feel kind of numb or dead inside. Feel that in the body. And just open to what happens in the body when you really allow. I seduce others to feel alive because I don't feel alive, or I let someone else seduce me in order to feel this heightened sense of pseudo aliveness. Feel it in the body again, and just bring all your attention there and let it share its story of what it really needs, the real deal. And of course, you will give it the real deal, because you'll say, I'm here with you and I have no agenda. I'll just be with you and let you share the sensation. So the last pattern I want to talk about here is wonderful patterns. And wonderful patterns are interesting because they're not about something that is too bad. There's a trauma also about something that is too good. The classic example of that, of course, is, somebody who really, is in high school and has never stood out, and then for one moment catches, the touchdown pass, that wins the championship or something, but the rest of the time they were sort of in the background. So it was so much better than everything else that there's what's called positive emotional charge. And 40 years later, this person is still at the bar talking about that one catch, and trying to reenact it, because it's the same with any kind of trauma. If you can get stuck in that moment and keep trying to create that moment over and over and over again. And that can be, of course, about some moment like what we're talking about here. It can also be about love relationships. So suppose we carry a flame because we had the ideal relationship in high school, and we had never, it was first love, and we're carrying a flame for this person because we moved away from each other and somehow lost each other, but we'll never find a relationship that good. So everything becomes compared to that, idealized relationship, and is found wanting. And so you have to then be with the part of you that has idealized it and compares it to everything else, and never finds anything else that lives up to that standard. Feel that in the body and let it share and give it what it truly needs, which is, true love, as opposed to this craving. Because, of course, what we're dealing here with is craving. It's like an addictive quality. And of course, the same thing can be true for food. It's like, one reason we have a wonderful pattern is something tastes so good, with chocolate chip cookies, it tastes so good that there's a craving for that experience. And if you crave that experience, you lose your mind and you lose your discernment and you just keep eating them. Why? Because they taste so good. So there's this positive emotional charge that wipes out your capacity to say, do I really want to do this? Is it really worth the gratification, the taste, just to have that experience, but then to gain a lot of weight? So, some of us know that intimately, I have to say. Or also around food, sometimes people are rewarded by food. And so, they associate food with, the really good moments in their life because, they got a good grade and their parents, gave them food or something, and, or whenever something good happened, or their good memories are all around food. So they associate food with a kind of positive trauma because there's a compulsion to feel good through food, because it was the way that care and being fed, literally, instead of being emotionally fed, you may have been physically fed, and so that becomes something you crave. And what you'll also find is that if there are certain moments in your life, if your life feels sort of like it was nondescript, but something happens where a parent treats you specially, that also can be a wonderful pattern. So, if they always, if you have a parent, a father who neglected you, but like really loved the piano, and you started taking piano lessons, and for once he gives you all kinds of attention and actually gets you into a competition and goes out of his way to do whatever it takes to get you into it, you may find that you're in relationships where you are, feeling like the person doesn't give you enough attention, but occasionally it's like being a gambler, you get this sense of a hit. And that, of course, gambling is a kind of wonderful pattern where you get this hit, but it's fool's gold. It never really gives you what you want because it's like having a jackpot for a moment, but then you, of course, lose. So you can feel that in your body, also this sense of craving and this addiction for something that feels so wonderful when everything else pales in comparison. I just feel that. So we've now taken you on a quick journey through these 4 patterns. And, stop if you want to. You can go back and listen, and you can stop and feel these things in the body and let them share, because, it's like they just have their stories to share. And when we choose to become the sensations, we no longer are stuck there reliving those stories unconsciously, but we become by choice those beings, whether they're younger us or some other character altogether. And then we, of course, become the one who identifies with choosing and the larger self that says, I'm here with you, and I'm bearing witness to you. And I'm giving you what you wanted always, which was just a sense of I accept you. So having said that, we've now gone through all of our patterns, and we've gone through the appendix. And again, I am very reachable. My name is Andy Hahn, and you can reach me at ahahn@lifecenteredtherapy.com. You can find out all about our work at lifecenteredtherapy.com. So you can find out about our institute and all about life-centered therapy and all of our certified practitioners and all about our online training. And of course, you can also find our book there, which is what I've been talking about for these last many sessions, called The 1 Hour Miracle. And, it's always a miracle when for a moment we become freer of our fear and we become freer to live in alignment with life. So until our next time, I wish you well, and I wish you the joy of freedom, of becoming more of who you are.